What has been the creepiest moment of your life so far? I work at a thrift store, and there are a lot of homeless people who come in for help. We're partnered with a homeless outreach program, so I was pretty used to being around the homeless. There was a man who would come in every so often, and then eventually every day, conveniently the same days that I worked. My co-workers told me he was homeless and had severe brain damage. When I first met him, he tried showing me his display of knives. I mean, this guy wore cargo pants and had a knife for every pocket type of thing. One day after work, as I'm walking towards the parking lot to get into my truck, I see him in the parking lot in his truck. Keep in mind, at this point, I had my headphones on. I noticed there were some donations still left outside, so I decided to head over and clear them out before I left. As I'm about to pick up the donations, the man grabs me from behind and puts me in a full Nelson. At this point, my headphones fall out, as I notice it's him. I start telling him over and over to let me go. He finally lets me go, and as he does, he just smiles at me and winks, and he says, "I finally gotcha." Weeks later, he was seen on the local news for grooming children. Creepiest shit ever. First one. A couple came in while I was fronting the store, making it look nice and all that jazz. I say the usual hello, and they ask for the restroom. I point them in the direction. Well, I'm still on the sales floor, and the guy walks out. He starts looking for stuff to buy, and his son is with him. I see that he's heading to the register, so I make my way over there, and we meet up. His girlfriend puts some stuff on the register, and we begin small talk. I scan everything and stand there like an idiot, and ask what their son was getting. They both look at me confused, and told me they didn't have a kid. I told them I saw a boy following him around. It freaked him out, and it freaked me out. The second one is a little shorter. Once again, I was cleaning the gas station. I was by the hallway that leads to the restroom, and an old Mexican dude comes out, gives me a smile, and heads to the coffee island, and then just disappeared. I waited at the counter, but he never showed up. I asked the fuel man when he came by to help me look for him in the kitchen, but it was empty. He called me crazy and said to get some sleep when I got home. My wife and I had just moved into a new apartment on the top floor of a 4-story complex. I think it used to be an office space because the layout was a little odd. It was a big U shape with a large bedroom on the inside of the U, with the other rooms and kitchen space on the outside. It was really big, but I guess the layout made it a hard sell because we got a pretty nice price on it. Both ends of the U-shape had doors on them that opened to the hallway outside our apartment. The bedroom in the middle also had 2 doors that opened to the legs of the U-shape. If you opened both of them, you could see straight through the bedroom. It was a weird layout, but kind of novel. I moved in first because I worked from home at the time and needed my work computer set up ASAP. I spent the first night alone there while my wife stayed at our previous place with the bulk of our stuff. Now this place had a buzzer that opened the front door. Our apartment had an intercom with 3 buttons, but they weren't labeled. Night falls and I'm chilling in the new place, mostly watching stuff on my iPad and wondering how we're going to use the space when I hear the intercom beep. I walk over to it and wait a moment because I'm honestly not sure how it works. It beeps again. I hold down the first button and hear the speaker turn on, but it's just dead air. I ask who's there and get no response. I can kind of hear that someone's there, but they aren't saying anything. I ask again who it is, and still nothing. I figure that maybe I need to hold in the second button to talk to them, so I hold it in and ask again. Still nothing. After a few seconds, I hear a door open and close, and then there's real silence, like nobody's there. I'm a little unsettled by this, so I call my wife to ask if she's trying to get in. She picks up and says she's at home. I tell her about the intercom and she says the first button is to listen, the third button is to talk, and the middle button buzzes them into the building. At that moment, I'm standing by one of the front doors and hear someone slam open the stairwell door just outside it. Just a moment later, someone tests the handle on my front door. Luckily, it's locked and deadbolted, but in a moment of panic, I realize that the other door is unlocked, and I hear the person in the hallway walking towards it. I sprint through the bedroom to the other door, and reach it at the same time as the person outside. I slam my full weight into it like Dr. Grant on Jurassic Park, and spin the deadbolt closed. They test the handle and then go back to the stairwell. My wife is still on the phone during all this, and is freaking out, because she just heard me run down and then tackle a door to keep it closed. I'm explaining to her what happened, and as I'm doing it, the intercom beeps again. I freeze. Just a moment later, it beeps one more time. I hold in the listen button, and again it's dead air like before, but you can tell someone's there. After a few seconds, I hear the building's outer door open and close, and they're gone. I asked the building manager about it, but he said he didn't see anything on the cameras for the time I mentioned. Nobody. When I was 18, I worked in a small grocery store very close by my childhood home, in which I still lived with my parents. I used to have to close the store every night after working the 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. shift. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only shift they would give me, since I had to attend college classes during the daylight hours. I had a lot of regular customers, and I got to know lots of them and was pretty friendly with most everyone. I had one customer in particular who was an older gentleman. He never really struck up conversations with me, which sometimes made things awkward, particularly if he had lots of items to scan and we were the only two people in the store. One night, as I was scanning his items, he stared at me for a few minutes before saying, "Do you drive a white truck?" I didn't drive a white truck, and I was a little thrown by the question, so I gave a little laugh and responded, "No, I sure don't." He was silent for maybe 15 seconds before he replied, "And why is there always one parked in front of your house?" I could actually feel the blood draining out of my face as my hands started shaking while finishing putting his grocery items into his bags. I did not drive a white truck, but my father did. This man had obviously been following me home after I closed the store at night. I ended up responding with something like, "I have no idea what you mean. I live in a neighboring county and I don't know anyone with that vehicle." After that night, he never said anything else to me, but I did report him to the store manager, and afterward my mom or my boyfriend, now husband, would come meet me before I got off, and walk me to my car. Still one of the most startling things that's ever happened to me. I'm now much more vigilant as to my surroundings, particularly at night and while alone. Also, I'll go ahead and add some more information. Many people are suggesting this man may have been a neighbor. There's no way of knowing now, but I will say that my parents lived, and still do, in the same house for the past 30 years. We know all our neighbors within about a 5-house radius on either side. This includes across the street and a couple on the street behind us. I had never seen him or his vehicle in our area before. He drove a very distinct gold car. If he was a neighbor, he certainly picked the wrong way to start that conversation. He had the opportunity to add if he lived nearby, and he did not. My gut gave me a bad feeling, but I am willing to play devil's advocate. Maybe it all just came out wrong. I was trying to meet some friends at an event, and was given the wrong address. I showed up at a very empty venue, but I knew it was close by, so I decided to look inside to see if there were flyers hanging up giving me any idea where I needed to go. When I walked inside, there was one older man in one of those denim one-piece coverall outfits you see janitorial or maintenance workers wear. He asked if he could help me with something, and I told him what event I was looking for. He was older and seemed like he couldn't quite hear me, so I went closer. As I was talking, he kept shaking his head and saying he couldn't make out what I was saying. When he got close enough, he said, "Well, I don't know anything about that, but did your daddy touch you when you was little?" I jumped and started to back away. He started coming toward me. I was looking around for the best place to run and saw there was an entrance to the skywalk nearby. Then I saw a lady security guard doing rounds. I started booking it in her direction, and the jumpsuit guy was running right behind me like he was going to grab me. The security guard saw me, and I started frantically pointing at the guy. He stopped dead in his tracks and sprinted in the opposite direction. Ran pretty fast for an old dude. She started screaming, "Stop right there," and was chasing him. I ran away and later emphatically admonished my friend who gave me the bad directions. I've had a lot of stupid shit happen in my life. This is about a false awakening dream where I woke up several times, but was actually still dreaming. False awakening dreams are so trippy in the most terrifying way. I had one in 2013 as a PTSD nightmare that still affects me sometimes. My mother was abusive and I had moved out of her house and in with my boyfriend at his grandma's house. Little did I know, grandma was abusive as all hell too, and descending into dementia, which made her even worse. I was asleep at my boyfriend's grandma's house in 2013. The nightmare was that I woke up in my own bed at my mom's house. She was screaming at me to wake up. I was confused and asked where my boyfriend was. She told me that wasn't my boyfriend's name. I was dating my ex-boyfriend from 2011. I was terrified that I dreamed up my whole relationship, getting away from her, moving states away, and having 2 years pass. I tell her something is very wrong, and I might need to go to the hospital or something. Then I wake up in bed at my boyfriend's grandma's house. Grandma is standing over me, screaming for me to wake my lazy fat ass up, and she's telling me I need to leave her house and she's going to call the cops and say I'm trespassing. I'm now having a panic attack. Then I woke up in my bed at my mom's house again. She's screaming that there's something wrong because I just passed out talking to her after saying I needed to go to a hospital. I wake up at my boyfriend's grandma's house again, with her screaming at me to get the hell out of her house now, that she doesn't care if I just passed out and woke back up. This went back and forth like 10 times, with me dreaming that I was waking up in the different houses with these insane women screaming at me. When I actually woke up, I was so fucking scared. I thought I lost my mind, and I was on edge for at least a week, thinking I was dreaming my current reality. I had this dream 6 years ago. Still, when I start to get anxious, I hear either one of them or myself screaming in my own head. I start to worry that I'm not in reality. It's truly awful. It kinda went away for about 2 years as my mental health improved, but I've had some shit happen recently that has made my anxiety, depression, and PTSD get shitty again. I work in a hospital as a midwife, and I do a lot of night shifts. I don't find the hospital creepy or anything. It's quite peaceful at night when there's nobody around, so I always volunteer to take samples to the lab in the basement to get some peace and quiet off the busy ward. One time, I was walking down the hallway at about 3 a.m., and I noticed a lady standing still, staring out the window in her nightgown. I was pretty surprised because it was so late, and I didn't think the nurses would have let an old lady wander about by herself at this time of night. I walked up to her and asked her if she was okay, and she replied that she was fine, but she didn't know where she was supposed to go. There was a geriatric ward nearby, so I told her I'd take her to the ward, and joked that she wouldn't be able to get out the window. She'd have to find a door if she was looking to escape, but she should probably wait till daytime. She let me lead her back to the ward, and I buzzed through first and held the door open for her behind me, while I tried to flag down a nurse. One came over and asked what I needed, which I thought was weird, so I just said I found this lady in the hallways. Is she one of your patients? The nurse gave me a really weird look and said, "Which lady?" I looked all around me, and she'd gone. I opened the door to check the hallway, but there was nobody there. I thought maybe I hadn't noticed her go back to her bed. The nurse saw how confused I was and asked if I knew her name. I didn't. Then asked if I could describe her. So I mentioned that she was wearing a frilly purple nightgown with butterflies and flowers on it. She was a black lady with protruding dark eyes, and she had a gold cross necklace on. The nurse looked really shocked and just blurted out, "She died." I was obviously even more confused, and so we went to the office. Because the patients were asleep, we didn't want to talk too much on the ward, where she told me that she knew exactly who I was talking about. She described her back to me, and it was an exact match. She had been a patient there for months, and had died earlier that day. The nurse started crying at this point. Night shifts, man, they really get to you. And I was crying, and it was all very weird. I wasn't very creeped out at this point, honestly, just quite lost and confused about the whole situation. When I got back to my ward, my manager was obviously quite annoyed about how long I'd taken, so I explained everything that happened, and a few other midwives overheard, and oh boy, that's when it hit me. I was shaking and felt really sick. Everyone was trying to comfort me, saying maybe I'd helped her move on or something, but it stuck with me ever since, and I really hope she found where to go. Never saw her again, and never volunteered to do lab runs at night anymore. I was lying down in bed, on the verge of falling asleep, when my closet door did one of those horror movie-like creaking opens. I was so terrified, and I didn't know whether to go close it or just try and close my eyes. I ended up sleeping about 2.5 hours that night. That passage reminded me of an old friend of mine who had a sketchy closet. It was quite a large closet, which was weird for an average to small house, and a small room, which had wooden floors. He told me how he would hear footsteps that sounded like large boots in the closet. The light in the closet would also turn on, and there would occasionally be a knock on the door, and it opened almost every single night around 5 a.m. He had heard or witnessed it many times. He said it would wake him a lot, and going in the closet just gave you the weirdest feeling. Not necessarily good or bad, but just not right. I had hung out there a lot, but nothing ever really happened other than a couple instances of hearing a knock on the door. My friend had told me not long before I stayed that things were starting to happen more often, but it never really crossed my mind. The first and only time I stayed over there, I remember at some point, maybe around midnight, being in the room with him looking for a video game to take down to the basement where his PS3 was. We both suddenly heard a knock on the door. We just looked at each other like, "You heard that, right?" But then just continued on. Not 30 seconds later, we heard another knock. This time, my friend decided to go over and knock back. Nothing. He knocked some more as I walked over to the door. We just stood there for a minute, and I shit you not, began to hear footsteps that sounded like boots. It didn't really sound like it was coming towards or going away from the door, but just like walking around. It was very faint. We just looked at each other and ran down to the basement. I really couldn't believe it, honestly. My friend just said, "Dude, I told you." Yeah, cool. Fast forward to bedtime a few hours later, and we go back up to sleep. I set up on the floor and we go to bed. I had completely forgotten about the closet until, of course, I laid down to sleep. It was roughly 3 a.m., and my friend passed out immediately. Great. I decided to stay distracted by getting on my iPod Touch, as I was super anxious at that point. The room just did not feel right. By the way, his room door is closed and his dad is asleep. There's no one else in the house. My back was facing the closet, and I refused to look toward it. Fast forward to just minutes after 5 a.m., and I hear a doorknob and a fucking door creak open. I quickly turned to look, and it was not the bedroom door, and my friend was a foot away in bed. I nearly shit myself. I just as quickly turned back and ducked under the blanket, and could not move. It was colder all of a sudden as well. Honestly, I was terrified. I felt like something was just standing a few feet behind me, staring at me. Maybe 5 minutes goes by, and I hear the door close. It was a relief in the weirdest way. I couldn't believe what had just happened, and I was wide awake. I think I managed maybe an hour of sleep a few hours later. I told my friend the next day, and he just had the same reaction. "Dude, I told you," and said it didn't wake him up. I hung out there a lot after that, but mostly in the basement. A few different instances of hearing knocks and footsteps, but the more it happened, the less sketchy it got. But I absolutely never stayed overnight again. When I was 18, I started getting this bizarre feeling of being watched a lot. Just that feeling like someone's watching you, but you're alone. I smoked a lot back then, so I thought it was just normal paranoia. Then it happened even when I hadn't smoked. I went between my mom and dad's houses because I still lived at home while in school. I kept hearing what sounded like a human making bird noises. It was really creepy, and I heard it at both houses. Then I started having dreams that someone was stalking me. I dreamed that someone would break in and try to hurt me. I started seeing a lot of stuff on the news about crime, and it felt like this fear was all around me. Then, one night, my boyfriend and I fell asleep watching a movie. My room was in the basement, and I had a slim, long window by my bed. We woke up around 2 a.m. because my dog was barking at the windows. I thought he'd seen our cat outside. It was late, so I walked my boyfriend out to his car and felt off the whole time. I felt scared, and almost asked him to check the bushes by my window, but decided I was being ridiculous and went back inside and got ready for bed. The whole time I felt like I was being watched. I turned the TV on and couldn't shake that fear or that feeling. I finally went upstairs and woke my dad up and asked him to check my window. He grabbed a flashlight and went out on the upstairs balcony and shined the light down. As he did this, I went back downstairs to grab my phone. Just as I did, I saw a man's face in my window, and I screamed. My dad saw a man run down our driveway, and he chased after him, but couldn't catch him. We called the police and filed a report, but nothing ever came of it. He could have just been looking in that night, but I think whoever was watching me had been watching me for a while. Back in high school, there was a little forest behind my parents' house. My older sister went exploring one day, and she said she found an abandoned house back there. She convinced me to follow her and come see it. Weird. Big, square, concrete exterior structure with a staircase leading up the outside with no ceiling. The door was unlocked, so we entered. Multiple dead possums, just skeletons surrounded by fur. Random stuff littered around. A calendar on the kitchen wall. 1973. In the bedroom, amidst the ruin and chaos, a neat stack of letters written in a handsome cursive sat on a desk. She briefly scanned their content. I remember her saying it was something about a divorce/separation, loss or transfer of property, etc. Sister takes the letters home with her, along with a few other items out of curiosity. Immediately, weird shit started happening around our house. That first night, for the first time ever, I felt this presence standing right next to me in bed, while having an intense episode of fear and panic. I was almost sure I could hear it breathing. A few nights later, playing video games with a friend at 3 a.m., everyone else had been asleep for hours. We both clearly hear the sound of my front door opening. I know this because we both looked at each other and without saying a word ran immediately to the front door. It was closed and locked. A few other events happened as well, but I'll skip those for brevity. It all culminated on a normal Thursday night. At the time, I was a junior in high school, and the youngest. Both of my siblings were away at college, so it was just me and my parents. They had both tucked in for the night about 20 minutes before. It was a split-plan house, so they were all the way on the other side. It was around 11 p.m., and I was brushing my teeth. If you've ever lived in a house with tile, you probably know how you can usually kind of hear/feel someone walking around. I heard light footsteps coming down the hall toward me in the bathroom. I figured, rationally, that it was my mom, who forgot to tell me something before bed. My bathroom has a big mirror, where you can see the doorway behind you when you stand at the sink. I heard the footsteps walk down the long hall and turn the corner into the bathroom. I saw nothing. Instantaneous chills all over my body. I heard the footsteps walk right up next to me on my left side and stop. Nothing for a few seconds. Just enough time for me to look left in case it was, I don't know, a vampire with no reflection or something. Nothing there. 10 to 20 more seconds. Almost just enough time for me to shake my head and question my senses. Except that's when it spoke. 6 inches from my left ear. I wish I had some way to better relate to you how it sounded. It was raspy, wispy, angry. It almost sounded altered in some way. It was not in English, and I couldn't understand what it said or what language it spoke. It lasted about 2 or 3 seconds. Again, the strongest wave of chills I've ever felt coursed through. I ran to my bedroom, closed the door, grabbed a sharpened pencil, and faced back towards the door, panting and having no idea how to defend myself. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I went to sleep, hoping I woke up. I told my parents and my sister the next day. She told us there was a trash bag of stuff from the abandoned house in her old closet. We decided to take the bag back to the house, except it was locked this time. We left the bag in front of the door and got the fuck out of there. Nothing like those events has ever happened again. Since then, they've demolished the forest and made it a wetlands preserve, basically a lake from the roadside. I still only think of that house and where it used to stand when I pass by. This started when I was about 16. I had a friend from school message me while I was at work saying, "How can you not recognize me?" I asked back what she was talking about, and she said, "I just grabbed you in town and said hi, and you didn't recognize me." I informed her I've been at work for the past 7 hours, and whoever she grabbed wasn't me. Fast forward a year, and I'm at college, walking to the bus with a friend of my boyfriend. And my boyfriend, who I'm still with 6 years later, messages me asking why I ignored him. I asked what he meant, and he replied, "I've just seen you on a train and waved at you through a window, and you gave me a dirty look." I told him how I'm not even in the same town, and how I'm with his friend. He called me a liar and said he was only a foot away, and it was definitely me. He then messaged his friend to back his side up. She obviously backed me up, and even sent a picture of us together to prove it. The same year, I lived and worked in a pub with my family. It would have maybe been 7 at night, and I was due to be working at 8. I got a phone call from my mom telling me to come down to the pub. I moaned I'm not meant to start for an hour, and she said, "There's a guy down here eating with 2 people, and he looks exactly like you in every way." I got dressed into my uniform and made my way downstairs. As I came through the door to the pub, I saw a guy with the same color hair as me leave through the front door, but I didn't get to see his face. The entire pub went from looking at him to looking at me, with their mouths open. I went behind the bar, and the regular customers were saying how they couldn't believe it wasn't me. Even my mom was saying the only reason she knew it wasn't me is because she knew I was upstairs when she rang me. This brings me to last week. I get a message from my boyfriend asking why I'm driving around on his street. I was confused and sent a picture of me at work to show it wasn't me. He was walking back from work to get to his street and saw this doppelganger in the same kind of car as me driving around, but he drove off after my boyfriend saw him. So I think I have a doppelganger, and it's creepy but also pretty cool. Not so much creepy to me, but I'm sure others will get creeped out by this story. I'll shorten it up by skipping details and examples. My 17-year-old died in a crash in late 2017. Before then, I had an odd thing of always recognizing the number 33. That also happened to be his jersey number. This led to either a wide belief that my son is still with us every time we see that number, or people just saying that because what do you say to someone who lost a child? Anyway, my son had worked at a golf course since he was 14. He and his boss became very close. As a result of his death and the 33 thing, she and I became spiritually connected and share these stories with one another when I see her at the course. Well, it's still winter here, so I haven't seen or talked to her since late fall. Friday night, I got a text from her. It said, "I was thinking of your son while driving to a training session tonight." Then the song by Tennille Townes, "Jersey on the Wall," came on. I started to cry for him. Then I looked up and saw the street I was driving on. She inserted a MapQuest picture. "I'm pretty sure it was your son telling me to reach out to you." I had never heard the song before, but the fact that she reached out to me that day stunned me. I texted her back, "Oh my god, today's my son's birthday." She texted back that she had no idea it was his birthday. She was stunned. I cried after I read that, even though I thought it was pretty cool. When I had some quiet time to myself, I looked more closely at the MapQuest pic she'd sent. She was driving by a road named my first name. That freaked me out a little bit. Then I was curious about the song, so I looked it up. It's about a senior in high school that died in a car crash. I burst into tears. I don't know if I was happy crying or sad crying, but I sobbed and wailed for a good hour. I'm not creeped out by all the coincidences, but I know that others surely would be. For me, it confirms that my son is all around us. I was totally depressed on his birthday, all day. I made sure I was busy at work for 8 hours, and afterwards, I went home. I was alone, so I could just cry at home by myself whenever I needed. I was not lonely. I didn't want comfort from anyone, because the only comfort for me would be to have my son back. And somehow, I believe my son found a way to let me know he was with me, and sent me a message through a living angel.